Hi, this is Krista Stefani, and this training module will guide you through how to complete the Expenses tab of the cost survey that is being conducted by the State of Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services for the Aged and Disabled Waiver and Pass services. This Expenses tab is designed to collect and allocate expenses to each program based on the expenses you incur related to providing these services. You will notice that throughout this document, there are numerous information buttons that you may click to provide you with additional information related to each line and what is requested to be reported there. There are also automatic calculations built in. You will only be required to enter information in cells that are this light blue or gray color. With that being said, just because a cell is highlighted in that color doesn't necessarily mean that you have to provide information or an expense related to that item. The items pre-populated here are for guidance only, and you still have the ability to customize an expense description that suits the needs of your agency. So to start off with, we will ask you to enter information related to payroll taxes and employee benefits, including any bonus pay for all employees of your agency. Based on the total employee taxes and benefits, those costs will allocate to each related wage based on that wage percent of total wages reported on this schedule. Now, if you have already viewed a couple of the other training modules, you will have already seen that we entered information related to the direct support professional employee salaries. As you can see here, there was $100,000 that we pre-populated, and it was allocated by service. Those amounts come through and pre-populate on the schedule, so you do not need to re-enter that information. Based on the wages, employee benefits will allocate on that wages percent of the total wages, and also the direct support contracted expenses automatically flow onto the schedule from the direct support contracted tab. This will then calculate the total direct support professional wages, salaries, benefits, and contracted services by service and in total. Next, this schedule will pre-populate information based on the information reported on the Program Staff tab related to your program-related support staff and the services that they support. This will also automatically calculate an employee benefit percent related to those wages to calculate your total program-related employee salaries and wages. So the next information that you will be asked to input is information that's related to your non-payroll program-related expenses. So these are expenses, again, that are required for you in rule or through the waiver service definition to provide that relate to the direct service provision for the individuals being served. So you will go through your general ledger and identify the expenses as they relate to program expenses and enter that information here. So I'm going to just enter some made-up data as we're going along here, so you can see how the allocations and the cost flow through. Now, something I would like to point out is in this program-related expenses, you will see food listed. This food here should be any food expense that is directly related to individual care, excluding the cost of food that is considered part of room and board for an assisted living facility. Examples of food expense that would be reported here relates to the food related to home delivered meals, if you provide that service, Or if you have adult day health and part of that service program is training individuals how to prepare a meal, those food expenses are allowed to be reported here. Also not to be reported in this section are any occupancy expenses related to room and board for an assisted living facility or other residential services. So as you go through, again, these are just guidance. They're expense guidance. You are not required to report an expense on every single line. But then at the end, you will total your total non-payroll program related expenses. And as you can see, the expenses are allocating to each service. And that allocation is being made based on the percent of total direct program employee salaries and wages calculated above. Then this cell will automatically calculate the total program salary and benefits, program related non-payroll related expenses, and your total direct support professional wages, salaries, benefits, and contracted services. This is what we are calling your accumulated cost for that service, which will be then used to allocate the administrative and general expenses further down on the schedule. For your assisted living facilities, we are asking you to report all room and board expenses in this section. That includes, for your assisted living facility, any general facility maintenance salary and wages, because within the waiver definition, the general facility maintenance expenses are considered to be part of room and board, and federal regulations prohibit any room and board expenses to be paid out through waiver dollars. Let's pre-populate. You'll also have depreciation expense or maybe a lease expense related to the assisted living facility building, other occupancy expense such as utilities, property taxes, property insurance. Again, you can click on the expense associated on the information button and it will provide you with additional guidance. And then here's your food expense related to the individuals who are residing within the assisted living facility. Now, as you can see here, because some of these occupancy expenses, except for food, may relate to an administrative space within your assisted living facility, we are calculating an allowable administrative occupancy expense based on the square footage you will indicate on the assisted living facility tab. What will happen is on this schedule, it will allocate an allowable expense based on the administrative square footage to be included with the assisted living facilities administrative and general costs. From here, then we ask you to populate your administrative and general expenses. So these are your expenses that any business would be required to have in order to operate. So they're general operating expenses, such as maybe payroll personnel, an administrative assistant, or other administrative positions. So again, once you enter the wages, an employee benefit amount will allocate to calculate your total administrative employee salaries and benefits. And then from there, you can also report any other administrative costs that your agency incurs in order to operate. Some specific items I would like to call out in this training is for your occupancy expenses for the administrative areas for an assisted living facility. Those are already accounted for in this room and board expenses, so please do not duplicate them here. But for all other services, you can include that expense in this section for your administrative staff. If your agency is part of a chain, Generally, what happens is you have a central or a home office, which may charge the facility an administrative fee, but in reality, that amount is not really what is paid back to that home office or central office. What we are asking you to do is to report any actual expense allocated from that home office, not the management fees that are charged to the facility, and report that here. So let's enter a couple other expenses in here for demonstration purposes. Again, you are not required to fill out every single line, and you can pre-populate your own expense descriptions. So what will happen is then your total administrative expenses, wages and non-wage and benefit expense, will allocate based on this accumulated cost. So the percent for that service of the total accumulated cost will be used to allocate the administrative expenses. Now we do have a section down here for you to report non-reimbursable expenses. These non-reimbursable expenses are laid out in the Provider Reimbursement Manual as issued by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and generally these expenses are not allowable for any type of federal reimbursement, or cannot be paid out related to these services. So some examples: if you have a marketing department or fundraising, the wages and benefits associated with those employees are not allowable. Any bad debt expense you may have should be not allowable. Promotional advertising is not allowable, or any contributions or donations your agency makes are not allowable. And there are other cells in here for you to pre-populate other non-allowable expenses. So at the end, this survey will calculate a total expense. What we're asking is, from your supporting documentation, you enter in the total expenses. You may not come out exactly because of rounding or other calculations, but it will calculate a percent difference of what is on your cost survey compared to your supporting accounting records and calculated variance. Please read this message carefully. If it says the variance is tolerable and it does, then you don't need to do anything else before submitting the cost survey. But say your accounting records show $600,000, but you've only accounted for 500,000 of them, that variance is not within tolerance. So what we will do is ask you to go back through your accounting records to make sure that you have properly accounted for all of your expenses, whether it be on the direct support employee tab, direct support contracted, your program staff, or built into this, the expenses included on this schedule. We're asking you to please review and make sure that this message states that at the end of the day, your variance is within tolerable limits. Again, we thank you for all of your time that you have spent in completing this cost survey and reviewing this training module.